Imagine you're a passenger on a bustling transatlantic flight, taxiing down a foggy runway at a small island airport. The engines hum steadily as you glance out the window, seeing nothing but thick mist swirling around. Suddenly, through the haze, lights pierce the fog. Another massive jet hurtling toward you at takeoff speed. You have mere seconds to react as the world erupts in fire and chaos. This is the terrifying story of the Tenerife airport disaster, the deadliest accident in aviation history, which claimed 583 lives on March 27, 1977. An event born from a cascade of miscommunications, human pressures, and unforgiving circumstances that forever changed how the world flies. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon in the Canary Islands, off the northwest coast of Africa. The date, March 27, 1977. Tenerife, the largest of the islands, was a popular tourist spot, but its Los Rodeos Airport, now known as Tenerife North Airport, was a modest regional facility perched at 2,077 feet above sea level amid rugged volcanic terrain. The airport featured a single 3,300-meter runway, runway 12/30ths, and a parallel taxiway connected by 4 short spurs labeled C1 through C4. It lacked ground radar, relying solely on visual sightings and radio communications. On this day, the weather was variable. Clear skies mixed with dense fog banks rolling in from the nearby Tide volcano, reducing visibility to as low as 100 meters in patches. 2 Boeing 747 jumbo jets, the largest passenger aircraft of their time, were at the center of the tragedy. The first was KLM Flight 4805, a charter flight operated by KLM Royal Dutch Airlines, bound for Gran Canaria Airport, also called Las Palmas or Gando, from Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport. The aircraft was a Boeing 747-206B, registration PHBUF, christened Rhine River. It had been in service since 1971 and was powered by 4 General Electric CF6-50E Turb 50E turbofan engines, capable of carrying up to 480 passengers in a typical configuration. On this flight, it held 234 passengers, mostly Dutch families on vacation, including 52 children and 14 crew members. Among the passengers were 4 Germans, 2 Austrians, and 2 Americans. One notable passenger was Rabina van Lanschot, a 19-year-old Dutch tour guide residing on Tenerife, who had boarded in Amsterdam but chose not to reboard after the diversion, opting instead to hitchhike home. This decision saved her life, reducing the onboard passenger count to 234. The KLM cockpit crew was highly experienced, led by Captain Jacob Louis Veldhuizen van Zanten, aged 50. Van Zanten was a star at KLM, serving as the airline's chief flight instructor for the Boeing 747 fleet. He had accumulated over 11,700 total flying hours, including 1,545 on the 747. However, he had spent the previous 6 months primarily in simulators, training other pilots, and had not flown a revenue flight in 12 weeks. This hiatus might have contributed to a subtle rustiness in real-world operations. His first officer was Klaus Mers, 42, with 9,200 total hours and just 95 on the 747, having recently transitioned from the Douglas DC-9. The flight engineer was Willem Schroeder, 48, boasting 17,031 hours, including 543 on the 747. Schroeder was a former naval aviator, known for his meticulous attention to systems. The cabin crew consisted of 11 flight attendants, experienced in handling long-haul charters. The second aircraft was Pan American World Airways Flight 1736, a Boeing 747-121, registration N736PA, named Clipper Victor. This jet held historical significance. It was the first 747 to enter commercial service in January 1970, inaugurating Pan Am's New York to London route, and ironically, the first 747 ever hijacked later that year. It originated from Los Angeles International Airport, with a stopover at New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport, en route to Gran Canaria. On board were 380 passengers, predominantly American retirees and their families heading to a Mediterranean cruise aboard the Golden Odyssey. plus 16 crew members. The passengers included 2 children and a mix of nationalities. All but 5 were American, with the rest Canadian. 53 passengers were from Orange County, California, many part of organized tour groups. Additionally, 2 Pan Am employees, a ground engineer and a flight attendant, boarded in New York and occupied cockpit jump seats, bringing the total souls on board to 396. The Pan Am cockpit was commanded by Captain Victor Franklin Grubbs, 56, a veteran with 21,043 total flying hours, including 564 on the 747. Grubbs was known for his calm demeanor and had flown combat missions in World War II. His first officer was Robert Loy Bragg, 39, with 10,800 hours and 2,796 on the 747. Bragg was sharp and communicative, later becoming a key witness in the investigation. The flight engineer was George Edward Warnes, 46, with 15,210 hours and 559 on the 747. Warnes handled the complex systems of the 747 with expertise. The cabin crew included 13 flight attendants, led by purser François Colbert de Beaulieu Greenbaum, who would tragically perish in the accident along with several colleagues. Miguel Torque Perez, Mari Ace, Sachiko Hirano, Marilyn Luker, Carol Thomas, Louisa Flood, Isel Sarp, Joan Jackson, and Suzanne Donovan. Survivors among the cabin crew included Dorothy Kelly, who heroically assisted in evacuations despite severe injuries. Both flights had departed their origins without incident, expecting a routine arrival at Gran Canaria for passenger disembarkation and cruise connections. However, at 1:15 p.m. local time, WET, which is UTC+0, a bomb exploded in the flower shop of Gran Canaria's terminal. Planted by the separatist Canary Islands Independence Movement, CIAIAC, it injured 8 people but caused no fatalities. Fearing a second device, warned about in an anonymous call, the airport authorities closed the facility, diverting all incoming flights to nearby Los Rodeos on Tenerife, about 70 nautical miles away. This included KLM 4805 and Pan Am 1736, along with 3 other large aircraft, an Iberia DC-10, a SATA DC-8, and a Capital International Airways DC-8. The sudden influx overwhelmed Los Rodeos, which was designed for smaller regional jets, not 5 wide-body airliners. The parking apron became congested, forcing planes to block the main taxiway and complicating movements. KLM 4805 landed first at 1:10 p.m., followed by Pan Am 1736 at 1:21 p.m. Passengers on both were initially kept aboard, but as the wait dragged on, Gran Canaria remained closed for hours. KLM allowed its passengers to deplane into the terminal for refreshments. Pan Am's crew, citing security concerns with the bomb threat, kept passengers aboard to expedite departure once clearance came. The Pan Am pilots requested permission to orbit overhead until Gran Canaria reopened, as they had sufficient fuel for 2 more hours aloft, but air traffic control denied this, insisting on the diversion to Tenerife. By 3 p.m., Gran Canaria reopened after the bomb threat was deemed a hoax. Both crews prepared for departure. However, Captain Van Zanten of KLM decided to fully refuel at Los Rodeos, taking on 55,500 liters, about 45 metric tons, of jet fuel, to avoid delays at the busier Gran Canaria. This process took 35 minutes, during which a refueling truck blocked the Pan Am jet from accessing the taxiway. Additionally, a Dutch family of 4, delayed in the terminal, further postponed KLM's pushback. These delays were critical. They allowed time for the fog to thicken dramatically, dropping visibility to hazardous levels. As the afternoon wore on, pressures mounted. For the KLM crew, Dutch aviation regulations imposed strict duty time limits, recently tightened to prevent fatigue. Van Zanten, already at the edge of his allowable shift after the diversion, faced the risk of exceeding limits if further delayed, potentially stranding the flight overnight and incurring costs for passenger accommodations. This get-home-itis subtly influenced decisions. The Pan Am crew, fatigued from their long transatlantic leg, was eager to depart but cautious in the fog. At around 4:45 p.m., with fog enveloping the airport, the tower cleared KLM 4805 to start engines and taxi. Due to the blocked taxiway, the controller instructed KLM to taxi down the entire length of runway 30, the active runway for departures. Perform a 180-degree backtrack at the end and hold in position for takeoff. This backtaxi procedure was unusual but necessary given the congestion. As KLM taxied into the fog, visibility was about 500 meters, but patches were denser. Moments later, Pan AM 1736 was cleared to follow KLM down the runway, but to exit at the third taxiway, C3, on the left, then proceed along the parallel taxiway to the threshold. This would clear the runway for KLM's takeoff. However, the instructions sparked confusion in the Pan AM cockpit. The crew queried, "Third to the left. Okay?" The tower affirmed, "The third one, sir. 1, 2, 3, third one." Using their airport diagram, the Pan AM pilots identified C1 and C2 but debated C3's location. In reality, C3 required a sharp 148-degree left turn followed by another 148-degree right turn. A maneuver an Airline Pilots Association, ALPA, study later deemed practically impossible for a fully loaded 747 due to its 47-meter wingspan and tight radius. C4, the fourth exit, was easier with 35-degree angles. The controllers, unfamiliar with 747 handling characteristics, likely miscounted or assumed C3 was feasible. The Pan AM crew, navigating in fog with no ground markings or signs, missed C3 and continued towards C4, believing it to be the intended exit. In the KLM cockpit, as they reached the runway end and turned around, Van Zanten requested takeoff clearance. The tower provided route clearance, instructions for after takeoff, but not actual takeoff clearance. After takeoff, proceed to pop a beacon, turn left to intercept the 325 radial. MERS read it back, adding ambiguously, "We are now at takeoff." Van Zanten, interpreting this as full clearance, advanced the throttles. MERS interjected, "Wait a minute, we don't have an ATC clearance." Van Zanten replied, "No, I know that. Go ahead, ask." But MERS transmission, KLM 4805 is now ready for takeoff, and we are waiting for our ATC clearance, was misunderstood. The tower responded, KLM 4805, you are cleared to the Papa beacon, climb to and maintain flight level 90. Right turn after takeoff, proceed with heading 040 until intercepting the 325 radial from Las Palmas VOR. MERS read back the clearance, ending with, we are now at takeoff. Possibly a non-native English slip for, we are taking off. The tower said, okay, stand by for takeoff, I will call you. Simultaneously, Pan AM transmitted, no, we're still taxiing down the runway, the Clipper 1736. These two messages overlapped on the single frequency, causing a 3-second heterodyne squeal in the KLM cockpit that masked the critical parts. Van Zanten heard only the okay, which he took as confirmation, and released the brakes. We gone. We're going. As KLM accelerated down the runway, reaching 100 knots, the tower instructed Pan AM, report when runway clear. Pan AM replied, okay, we'll report when we're clear. In the KLM cockpit, Flight Engineer Schroeder, hearing this, asked worriedly, is he not clear then, that Pan American? Van Zanten emphatically responded, oh yes, and continued the rollout. The crew's deference to Van Zanten's authority, stemming from his role as KLM's top instructor, prevented further challenge. This hierarchical dynamic was later identified as a key human factor. Why was hierarchy so potent here? Aviation in the 1970s was captain-centric. Junior crew often hesitated to question superiors. Van Zanten's prestige amplified this. Additionally, non-standard phraseology plagued communications. Words like takeoff were used ambiguously, and okay was vague. The absence of ground radar meant the tower couldn't monitor positions visually in the fog, which had worsened to under 100 meters. The extra fuel on KLM increased its takeoff weight to 340 tons, extending the required runway length and intensifying the post-crash fire. At 5:06 and 47 seconds p.m., as Pan Am approached C4 at taxi speed, Captain Grubbs spotted KLM's lights. "There he is! Look at him! Goddamn! That son of a bitch is coming!" Bragg yelled. "Get off! Get off! Get off!" Grubbs firewalled the throttles and veered left toward the grass. KLM, at 140 knots, just past V1, the commit to takeoff speed, saw Pan Am emerge from the fog. Van Zanten rotated prematurely, scraping the tail for 22 meters in a desperate climb attempt. The KLM's nose cleared Pan Am, but its lower fuselage, main gear, and left engines struck Pan Am's upper right side, ripping off the roof and killing passengers in the upper deck instantly. KLM's right engine sliced through Pan Am's aft cabin. KLM stalled, banked right, and crashed 150 meters beyond, sliding 300 meters in a fireball. All 248 aboard perished instantly or in the flames. Pan Am's severed fuselage erupted in fire from spilled fuel. Of 396 aboard, 61 survived, mostly from the forward section, including the entire cockpit crew, for flight attendants and passengers like Dorothy Kelly, who escaped through a hole in the fuselage onto the left wing and jumped to safety despite broken bones. Kelly later recounted, "The whole left side of the plane was torn wide open. I was thrown out, and everything went black." Other survivors included Joan Jackson, who helped pull people from the wreckage, and Robert Bragg, who assisted in evacuations while injured. The crash site was a scene of horror. Twisted metal, burning fuel, and screams amid the fog. Firefighters, initially unaware of two planes due to poor visibility, focused on the visible KLM wreck, delaying aid to Pan Am. 9 survivors succumbed to injuries later, finalizing the death toll at 583. All 248 on KLM, 335 on Pan Am. The Canary Islands Independence Movement denied involvement the next day. Investigations began immediately, led by Spain's Civil Aviation Accident and Incident Investigation Commission, CIAIAC, with input from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, Dutch authorities, Boeing, and the airlines. Over 70 experts analyzed wreckage scattered over 400 meters. Cockpit voice recorders, CVRs, and flight data recorders, FDRs, were recovered from the ocean-like debris field. The CVR transcripts revealed the overlapping transmissions and Van Zanten's premature takeoff as pivotal. The official Spanish report, released in 1978, cited the primary cause as KLM's takeoff without clearance. Contributing factors included fog obscuring visibility, simultaneous radio transmissions causing interference, ambiguous phraseology, airport congestion from the diversion, Pan Am missing C3, and KLM's extra fuel delaying departure and worsening the fire. The Dutch countered, emphasizing mutual misunderstandings, possible tower distractions, unconfirmed rumors of controllers listening to a soccer match, and Pan Am's failure to exit promptly. Ultimately, human factors were highlighted: fatigue, pressure, and poor crew resource management, CRM. To understand the technical side, consider radio communications in aviation. In 1977, Tenerife used a single VHF frequency for ground and tower ops, prone to blocking during overlaps. The heterodyne squeal, a high-pitched interference, masked, stand by for takeoff, and Pan Am's position report. Without it, Van Zanten proceeded. Fog dynamics. At Los Rodeos elevation, orographic lift from the mountains condensed moisture into dense banks, fluctuating rapidly. Visibility minimums for takeoff were 500 meters. It dipped below that unpredictably. Passenger details added poignancy. On KLM, families like the Dutch group of 4 who delayed boarding perished together. On Pan Am, retirees from California, such as the 19 from Rancho Bernardo, were lost, leading to memorials like a cross in San Diego. Survivor stories: Dorothy Kelly, a Pan Am flight attendant, suffered a broken arm and leg but guided passengers out. "I remember the heat and the smoke. It was like hell." Captain Grubbs, with burns and fractures, later testified, "We did everything we could, but it happened so fast." The aftermath transformed aviation. The disaster spurred the development of Crew Resource Management, CRM, a training program emphasizing teamwork, communication, and challenging authority. Pioneered by NASA and United Airlines in the late 1970s, CRM became mandatory worldwide by the 1990s, reducing hierarchy-related errors. Standard phraseology was overhauled by the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO takeoff, is now reserved solely for clearances. Alternatives like departure are used otherwise. Full readbacks are required, and ambiguous terms like okay are minimized. Airports upgraded. Tenerife installed ground radar, and a new southern airport, Tenerife South, opened in 1978 for international traffic, handling larger jets safely. Duty time rules were scrutinized. KLM's strict limits were relaxed to avoid pressure-induced risks. Compensation. KLM paid $110 million total, averaging $189,000 per victim, about $981,000 adjusted for inflation, limited by Warsaw Convention caps. Memorials honor the dead. The International Tenerife Memorial at Mesa Mota, 2007, a Dutch site in Amsterdam's Westgard Cemetery, and California's Westminster Memorial Park, a 30th anniversary service in 2007 reunited survivors and families. This tragedy's legacy. Aviation fatality rates plummeted post-1977, from 1 per 1.5 million flights to 1 per 12 million today, thanks to these reforms. Similar incidents, like the 1991 LAX runway collision, 34 dead, reinforced lessons, but none matched Tenerife's scale. The event underscored that safety is a chain, break one link, and disaster follows. Yet from the ashes rose a safer sky. For more on aviation's darkest days, check out the story of the 1996 Charqui-Dadri mid-air collision or the 2008 Spanair Flight 5022 takeoff crash in Madrid, both echoing themes of miscommunication and human error.